Hi, this is Len. Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles. Today is February 7th, 2020, and I'm recording this episode in downtown Denver. We are going to hear from Kathleen West, who has written a debut novel titled Minor Dramas and Other Catastrophes, published this week by an imprint of Penguin Random House. I'm also going to share some news that involves Macmillan's controversial change in how it makes books available to public libraries, and I'll have a couple of tech tips for you. There's a news story that I want to talk about in this episode, and it involves someone who has been on the show a couple of times, Bradley Metrock, who now runs the Digital Book World Conference in Nashville. There was a piece in the Washington Post that described how Bradley took quite a dramatic move against Macmillan, saying that employees of Macmillan would not be able to attend the upcoming Digital Book World Conference in Nashville in 2020 because of the change that they made in the way they make ebooks available for public libraries. I will have links in the show notes to some of these articles that I'm going to be talking to you about. This really got going in September of last year when the American Library Association and the Public Library Association launched a public campaign against Macmillan. And that's because Macmillan was about to implement a change in how it makes ebooks available for purchase. And it's really an embargo. It was announced in July of 2019. And under the change, John Sargent, who is the CEO of Macmillan, said that libraries of any size would be able to buy one ebook on the release of a new title, and then they would have to wait 8 weeks for additional copies. And these copies, they're not actually purchased, they're leased for 2 years. And this set off a real furor among libraries, and it had some weird aspects. I remember when it first came out, it was pointed out that this change applies to the Los Angeles or the Boston Public Library on the same basis as a small library in Vermont, that each one just gets one copy of an ebook when a new title comes out, and then they have to wait 8 weeks before they can buy additional ones. Sargent, this is a story coming, I think this is September of last year. Sargent is quoted as saying, "What I see is an ecosystem unbalanced, and it worries me about the future of the book. That's what worries me." And it's really driven by the fact that ebook borrowings at libraries are rising dramatically. It's something that people enjoy. They're willing to wait to get a book when it comes out, go on the waiting list, have a chance to read it for 3 weeks, and then return it. And this is all driven mainly by Overdrive, which is the platform for most of the ebook lending. So Bradley Metrock got involved in this. I think what happened was the ALA, the American Library Association, had some people at Digital Book World in the fall in September, and they kicked off a petition for people to register their dissatisfaction with Macmillan's move at Digital Book World, or coinciding with it. And there is now a petition which you can sign. I signed it myself tonight at ebooksforall.com. ebooksforall.org. And it's a pretty simple petition. You put your name in and your email address, your phone number, and then you get counted as the people who are against this move by Macmillan. At the time the petition was launched in September, the head of the Columbus, Ohio Metropolitan Library, Patrick Lozinski, was at the press conference, and he was quoted as saying, libraries are not competitors, we're collaborators. And this is the fault line between Sargent and the libraries as it has evolved, not just at that initial press conference, but also at a meeting that the American Library Association had, their Midwinter meeting. And this was an event that Sargent showed up at himself to try to explain the move, and it sounded like it got to be a pretty heated session. It was a 90-minute session at the ALA Midwinter meeting. And at that time, he said that it would take another 2 or 3 months to better assess the program. So it had started in November, and if this is in January, it'd be sometime in February or March would be this period where he was assessing it. He said it's too early to tell if the embargo was serving its function. This is from a really excellent Publishers Weekly article by Andrew Albanese. And Sargent said that he did not rule out changing this in the future. He recapped the decision by talking about the rapid growth of library ebooks lending and saying that it's an imbalance in the publishing ecosystem. The thing that struck me is he specifically linked it to the growth curve that Amazon created when it first launched the Kindle and priced new release books at $9.99, and then that led to the 2010 agency pricing among the then Big Six publishers and the antitrust suit that the Department of Justice brought against them and Apple, which they all lost. So and it's the same impulse. I mean, as I read this, obviously from kind of a ebook reader-centric viewpoint, the big publishers, and Sargent was really one of the most active people in leading up to that collusion among the big publishers to fix the rates or the prices and through agency pricing. And here he is now going against the libraries pretty clearly, as far as I can see, to slow the rise of use of ebooks by libraries, never mind the role of a library to make ebooks, all books, available to people on an equal basis, and especially people that have difficulty reading. And the librarians at the ALA meeting forcefully put that out and said that he really needed to take into account the role of the library before putting this kind of change in, which is really going to throttle back the availability of ebooks for people that were interested in them. It's now Bradley Metrock stepped in January, and he started out. He wrote a post at his Digital Book World site, and it was kind of touching. He talked about how he had a grandmother that took him to the library regularly, and he says the truth was that my library-loving grandmother was actually a top customer for the publishing industry. In other words, she created a reader in Bradley, and because she spent so much time at the library, it generated book sales by her and by others, and it was a sort of a personal example of the role that libraries have always played in helping the publishers to get adoption for books, and that it applies in the ebook world as well. When I added my name to the signatures at ebooksforall.org, the total number of signatures so far was 248,692, and they had 160,000 signatures at that site before the embargo went into effect, and those signatures were presented to Sargent hoping that he would change his mind, but he didn't. The other thing I've noticed, and I'm going to be talking about an extension that enables you to find what books you might be looking at on Amazon and see if they're at your public library. And when I went to a couple of the public libraries that I've had cards in at the past, each one of them had a kind of an alert banner warning people about this move by Macmillan and inviting them to go to the eBooksForAll.org site and add their names to the to the petition. So Macmillan is generating a lot of bad publicity among book lovers if for anybody who is going to their libraries looking to get ebooks. So Bradley Metrock steps into this. I mean, he played a role, obviously, or apparently, at that Digital Book World where they had the press conference announcing it. And in his post that he wrote on January 28th, he included these fighting words. He wrote, "It is our absolute privilege to ban all Macmillan employees from attending or speaking at Digital Book World until the company's library embargo is lifted and they fully comply with the requests of the American Library Association. This ban goes into effect immediately for all of Macmillan's many imprints and subsidiaries, as well as for employees of the parent company, Holdspring Publishing Group." This ban may last for a few days, Bradley wrote, or it may last 50 years. But we yearn for a time when we hear of major publishers doing nothing with libraries other than graciously partnering with them and showing heartfelt gratitude for cultivating their revenue stream known as lifelong readers. At the same time, Bradley announced that he was setting aside 25 full conference passes to Digital Book World 2020 in Nashville for librarians, and he's going to ask the American Library Association's help to identify librarians and staff that can take advantage of the opportunity to distribute these passes. It is important to us that even as Digital Book World becomes an increasingly precious and scarce learning and networking opportunity, that communities like librarians continue to have access. So fewer people from Macmillan will be at the Digital Book World Conference in Nashville this fall, but more librarians. I like Bradley's style here. He's kind of a pugnacious guy, and he really believes in books, and he's built this conference up to really matter and to really kind of poke Macmillan with this ban on their employees attending the conference. It generated some publicity in the Washington Post, and I've reached out to him. I see if maybe he can come on next week so he can talk a little bit more about his perception of how this campaign to get Macmillan to change his mind is proceeding. At this point, the other Big Five publishers have not joined them. I did notice that there was an audio book company that had also joined it, not Audible. Now, one thing that is a little awkward, or I haven't really quite figured out what to make of it. Amazon Publishing, which is Amazon's publishing company that has really grown and become more significant. Dean Koontz is published by it. They have never made their books available to libraries. And I did reach out to one of my contacts in Amazon Publishing to see if I could get somebody from them to say, well, why not? It seems crazy to me that Amazon, the company that really created the ebook revolution, would be even more restrictive than Macmillan in just saying that it's not making ebook copies of its books available to libraries. So that's I'd like to get to the bottom of that sometime and find out. But if it was simply that Amazon Publishing agreed with Macmillan that it's kind of a loser for an ebook publisher to make copies available to public libraries, that would be kind of significant, and I think I would probably think it was poor form on Amazon Publishing's part. But without having had a chance to talk to anybody about it so far, I think I'll withhold judgment. But I will point out that Amazon Publishing is in some ways even more restrictive on this than Macmillan, which is getting singled out for concerted pressure via the ALA and Digital Book World. Interesting. I've got a couple of tech tips to pass along for you, and the first one relates to borrowing ebooks at libraries. It's a library browser extension that is available for Firefox and Chrome browsers. I heard about this at Recommendo, which is a really cool weekly newsletter put out by Kevin Kelly and a couple of other people. It's a free app, and I'll have a link to it in the show notes that you can add to your Chrome or Firefox browser. What it does is, with the extension installed, if I go to Amazon from my computer, then and search for a book, say, the book that I was talking to the author about today, Minor Dramas, there's with a bit of delay as the information about the book is loading on the Amazon site, there's a little spot to the right that indicates the libraries that I've queued up in the app, which are the Denver Public Library and then the Cambridge Public Library in Massachusetts and the Boston Public Library. Now, it turns out that my Cambridge and Boston library card numbers have expired, but the Denver one is still good. And it showed that the book that Minor Dramas was available, but there was a long wait, and it gives you the chance, if you are interested in a book and you want just a very handy way to find out if it's available at your library, then this extension will show you what the case is for your particular library memberships right at the Amazon website. So this is pretty handy app, and if you are already using library borrowing of eBooks, you might find it interesting, and if it's something that you'd like to try out, it's an easy way in. The next tip comes to us from listener Mark Roberts, and it is a way to listen to audiobooks via your Kindle collection, and it uses Alexa, either Alexa devices or the Alexa app. Mark wrote, any book in your Kindle library can be an audiobook using the Alexa app. It's super easy, and this guy, as this guy explains in a 3-minute video, and I'm going to play a little bit from that video that he included the link to. Who even knew? What a tremendous feature, Mark writes. I have to agree, and I didn't, before I got this, I wasn't really clear that it was this easy to essentially turn any of your Kindle books into a book that you can listen to. And we'll see if I can demonstrate it here with a book. One of the books I'm reading is The Eye of the World, Book 1 by Robert Jordan. So we'll get my Echo Show here, bump the volume up a little so you can hear it. Alexa, read Kindle book The Eye of the World, Book 1.
Resuming Len's book, The Eye of the World, Book 1 of the Wheel of Time. Anything he did. His heart pounded so hard he thought that might give him away itself. Fool.
So on the Echo Show, I'm seeing the cover of the book and the title, and I think this is the chapter, 13 choices. So it's a nice display, and Alexa's actually reading the book to me. Alexa, stop. The command for this, I think it's best to say, Alexa, play Kindle book, and then the title, as I did. If you just say, Alexa, read a book, it's going to be trying to find that title in your Audible collection. And so to use this just for books that you don't have the actual Audible books for, but they are Kindle books, you just want to say, Alexa, play Kindle book, and then the title. The video that Mark sent me is from a blog site called Redeeming Productivity, and he goes to the ease of doing this even if you don't have any Echo devices.
All you have to do is download the Alexa app on your phone. Then just open it up, and you can tell it by pressing the blue button, the Alexa button, and you just say, Alexa, play Kindle book, and then give it the title. And she will just start reading that book to you.
Imagining a time when my spouse
and that'll work on your phone. And you can, with voice commands, you can say Alexa pause, Alexa stop, Alexa resume. You can do Alexa skip ahead, Alexa skip back. And one of my favorite commands with Alexa is you can say, Alexa, read faster or read slower. And she will adjust the speed at which she is reading the Kindle book, which is really awesome. The other thing is maybe you don't want to talk to yourself when you're out in public. That's one of the annoying things about using Alexa on your phone. Well, you don't actually have to pause and play and all that. There are controls that will pop up, and you can hit pause or play. And these even work while you're listening to it when you're on the iPhone lock screen. Also, if you're looking for books to play from your Kindle library, you can just open up the Alexa app and go to the Play menu down at the bottom, and then scroll down and you'll see your Kindle library. And you can just select any of those books and hit play on it, and it will start reading it there. So you don't even have to talk to the Alexa thing to use it. The really cool thing about this too, and this is just like a bonus, is since it's all within Amazon's ecosystem, this method of listening to the Kindle books, you can kind of consume books in a hybrid way. So, for example, I've been reading On Walden Pond, and I have been listening to it some of the time, and other times I'm actually reading it on my Kindle device or on my phone. But Kindle's Whisper Sync technology will remember my spot and will actually pick up wherever I left off, whether I was listening or whether I was reading it. Well, that's it. That's just a simple tip. I hope you found it helpful. If you liked it, if you're interested in more videos like this, go ahead and hit subscribe and click the notification bell. And you can find more things from me from Redeeming Productivity, where I have a blog and a podcast, redeemingproductivity.com. And our focus is on helping Christians get more done and getting it done like Christians.
That was Reagan Rose. I wanted to play the end of the piece so he'd have a chance to promote his podcast and his show, since that was a pretty useful tip that he explained pretty well. I like that synchronizing aspect to it. You can switch from the Kindle book to the audio. It's not an audible, it's an audio version with Alexa reading it. It strikes me, too, I don't have a car here in Denver, but when we're back in Cambridge and I've got the Tesla, I have the Echo Auto in the car, so I would be able to do this as a way to hear a book that I'm reading on my Kindle simply by saying, Alexa, play Kindle book, and then the title, and be able to listen to it as I'm driving around in the Tesla. So very handy, and thanks to Mark for bringing that to our attention. Time now for the interview. A teacher for 20 years in the Minneapolis school system, Kathleen West has written a debut novel that was released this week on February 4th, 2020 by Berkeley, an imprint of Penguin Random House. Kathleen graduated with a degree in English from Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota, and she holds a master's degree in literacy education from the University of Minnesota. I reached her yesterday, February 6th, by Skype at her husband's office, where I saw that he was bringing her a cup of something warm in the first few minutes of our conversation. I began my conversation with Kathleen by asking how publication day, or pub day, for her book compared with her expectations.
Waking up on Tuesday, I was very excited, and the day actually went pretty much as I expected. I did detour into a couple of local bookstores to check for my book, and I found it in those stores, so that was a huge thrill. And then on Tuesday evening, I had a book lunch party at a local Minneapolis bookstore called Majors and Quinn, and my family and my friends came, and it was just a huge delight. So it was super fun.
How cool. How much sleep did you get the night before pub day?
I slept okay the night before pub day, but the night after the party, I did not sleep at all. I was completely wired and just on a total high, and I hardly slept.
Well, let's go back in time. You decided to write a novel somewhere as you were approaching the age of 40, and set the scene there, and why did you decide to undertake that?
Yeah, I've always been a lifelong learner, and I've always been a passionate reader and writer, so I always had an idea that I would write a book, and I just hadn't. I went to college, and immediately out of college, I started teaching, and then I got married, and my kids were born, and pretty soon, I'm 35, 36 years old, and I haven't yet written a book. And by that time, my youngest child was in first grade, and I kind of thought, well, I'm not changing diapers anymore. Now's the time. Like, I'm going to be 40 whether or not I try to do this. So let's give it a shot. So at that point, I'm an avid reader, and I read a lot, but when you actually try to write a book, there's a lot to learn. So I ended up enrolling in a couple of writing classes at a great literary center we have here in Minneapolis called the Loft Literary Center.
Your coffee has arrived, or is that somebody else's coffee?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was going to be on video, so I asked my husband if he would bring me a tea, and he did.
Well, I think that's nice. You should have an author should have an assistant.
Yeah. I'm not sure he likes to think of himself that way, but yeah, it's what he's doing. But anyway, so I took these classes, and I carved out a time for myself. I'm an early morning writer, so 4:45 to 6:15 was my time. And I just committed to writing at that time weekdays for about 3 years. And then I had a book.
As you were, that 4:45, that's intense. Are you at your kitchen table, or where are you going for these early morning sessions?
I roll out of my bed, and I put on a sweatshirt, and I'm sitting on the couch in my family room with a blanket on top of me and tea at my side. And there's a big group of early morning writers that you can find on Twitter under the hashtag 5 a.m. Writers Club. And so I usually took a couple minutes to check in there and take a look what the other writers were doing. And then I felt a sense of accountability to those people on the internet too. So I just worked for that hour.
Yeah.
In my pajamas. Mm-hmm.
Well, let's tell the listeners a little bit about the book. Where does Minor Dramas and Other Catastrophes take place, and what's going on?
It takes place in the first-ring suburb of Minneapolis, in an affluent suburb, a place where you might have a 3-car garage and a lot of lawn, a pretty lawn with a manicured landscape there, and a really high-powered public school where kids are known to succeed and the sports teams win. and kids go to Ivies when they graduate. So it kind of takes place in a bubble like that.
And the two characters, one is a helicopter mom, the other's a teacher accused of by some of having a liberal agenda, but they kind of have similar predicaments. They're both facing social ruin at the hands of the internet. Tell us a little bit about those two main characters.
Sure. Julia Abbott, as you mentioned, is a helicopter mom who has kind of lost her sense of boundaries. She really is invested in the high school theater program and wants her son, Andrew, to get the part that he deserves. And she's done everything to get him there. He's had his private voice lessons and his dance lessons, and she's made a call to the principal, and she's donated a costume shop, and it's time. This is the part for him. And then there's a teacher, Isabel Johnson, who works at the school. She's kind of had to convince herself to work in this affluent suburb, and she's doing it because she believes that she can impact the kids in this space to make different choices in their lives. And she feels that they have the power and the advantages where they might actually be able to make big change in society. And so she approaches her role as teacher as kind of a person who's supposed to empower these kids to make change for the better. And they come into conflict. Their conflict blows up on social media, but it kind of starts because of Julia, the helicopter mom's daughter. She's in Isabel's class, and her daughter comes to really admire Isabel, to take on some of her ideas and her perspectives, and those challenge and threaten a little bit the life that Julia has led.
Well, which of these two characters do you like the best?
That's a great question. You know, when I started writing the book, the teacher, Isabel, was perfect in every way. She and I share some physical traits, some ideological impulses, and I just wrote a teacher that was, I thought, perfect in every way. Unimpeachable values, excellent decision-making. So in those early drafts, Isabel was right and Julia was wrong. And I learned I grew as a writer draft by draft, like, A, that doesn't make a great story, and B, that doesn't make a great character. So as I started to write them and layer in their motivations and their backgrounds and their feelings, like, I really came to like both of them quite a lot and feel empathy for them and understand their impulses and emotions. So I can't really pick a favorite. I think Isabel would be much easier to be friends with, but I feel a lot for Julia too.
When you write a book that draws on your personal experience and then also your skills as a writer, it changes you, I'm sure. And I'm wondering if, having written this book, you were to go back in time and be a teacher yourself or be a parent yourself, would writing this book have made you a better teacher or a better parent?
Well, let's see. I taught for so long. I've experienced interactions with all kinds of different parents. And I think what writing the book did in terms of changing my perspective is heighten my empathy a little bit. You know, getting into the heads of these parents makes me feel more amenable toward them, more sympathetic toward them when I'm dealing with them in conflict as a teacher. And I think what we have to remember in that teacher-parent relationship, which can be a really vulnerable relationship, is that both parties really care about the kid and want what's best for them. And sometimes what they think is best for the kid is not the same. So the teacher might think that one path is better and the parent thinks another path is better. And negotiating that and respecting each other's knowledge about both the child and then the teacher's knowledge about thousands of kids, kind of finding a place where that works can be a real challenge. But yeah.
I've heard the term helicopter mom, but I don't really know what it means and what's the helicopter in there. Where does that term come from and what does it mean?
It comes from this idea that, a helicopter hovers over. So it's a parent who hovers over their child, ready to step in anytime the child might face rejection or disappointment or failure, and tries to kind of take away those problems immediately. I've also heard the metaphor snowplow parent, kind of the same idea, like going in front of the child, clearing the way. And also lawnmower parent, same thing. So.
Well, those are obviously things probably best to be avoided. If you were going to coach a parent, my daughter has, a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and then my other daughter's got a 13-year-old who's entering high school next year. Oh. She's a literacy coach in the Cambridge Public Schools.
Oh,
but if you could share both the experience of writing the book and your own experience with a parent who has obviously aspirations for their child to succeed and all that, what's the best balance? How do you know when you're kind of erring on one side or the other and not becoming a helicopter parent?
That's a great question. And I think especially in modern parenting, we get a lot of messages that in order to be a good parent, you need to advocate for your child or, like to be there for them, to drive them to their things, to be constantly present. And so it can be hard to meet those societal expectations of being a good parent and then also not overstep. It's hard to find the line. And I think what's a really, really a good thing to remember as a teacher and as a mom, I think that letting your kids experience failure is so important and transformative. And so thinking, if you can, about the long game in a bad moment, like not, if your kid doesn't make the soccer or hockey team that they want to make, of course, my tendency is to say, well, the evaluators didn't see your skills and I'm going to make a call to the league and make this right. If instead you can say like, well, gosh, it really stinks that you're on the C hockey team. However, what are the life lessons that my kid is going to learn from this? Like, how are they going to pick themselves up and come back next time? That lesson is so much more important than the lesson that if I'm unhappy, my mom is going to fix it by making a call. So I try to really think as a mom and as a teacher, like failure is important, rejection is important, disappointment is important. Like I don't enjoy these things myself or for my children, but I think that learning how to navigate those things really makes you a stronger person long term.
There's another interesting character in the book who's the principal who gets caught in all these vectors of conflict. If you were hiring a principal for a middle school that your sons were going to be attending and could wave a wand, what's the most important qualities that someone sitting in that chair should have?
That is such an interesting question, and teachers everywhere think about this all the time. I think that a principal is a job where if the principal is doing a good job, you think it's easy to underplay what they're doing. Like if you have a good boss, then you're like, oh, the boss isn't that important. I get to do my work and I feel happy and fulfilled in my job. But if you have a bad boss, then you realize how important it is to have a good one. I think that a good principal has a strong vision for the school, like a strong educational philosophy that he or she can communicate. And then a good principal is excellent at collecting a bunch of perspectives, but then making a firm decision. I've had a hard time working for people who can't make decisions and don't want to be the boss, And I'm like, you are the boss. Just own it. Do it. Have your vision and move forward. And I think principals can also set a great tone in schools about how you communicate with each other, how parents and teachers communicate with each other. So a good principal would get a call from a parent, an angry parent, and they would say, have you talked to the teacher first? So they'd put it back. Instead of amplifying those negative voices, they would encourage the face-to-face communications between teachers and parents that can make things so much better.
Yeah, that makes sense. Given that my podcast has got its start inspired by the Kindle and following that, what's been your experience about using eBooks in the classroom or Kindles or seeing it as a tool for increasing love of books among young readers or possible drawbacks to the whole ebook phenomenon as well?
I'm a huge fan of ebooks, and basically any technology that advances literacy, I'm in favor of. And as I've taught so many kids through the years, I think the most important thing is not what format or what book you get into the hands of kids, but that kids are reading in general. So if a kid is motivated to read on a device, then I say go for it. I've also had a lot of excellent experiences in classrooms using Kindles and the Kindle app and iPads to help kids who have learning differences. Maybe they have a dyslexia or a processing difference from the other peers in their classrooms, and they can really benefit from assistive reading technology like an ebook, or especially there are a couple programs that kids can use to to follow along as they read. So like they can hear the words being read to them as they see it. And that has been transformative. So I'm a huge proponent of Kindle and other books.
Now, as you were deciding to write a novel, and you were doing that at a time when the whole self-publishing path was opening up in a way that it wouldn't have been 10 years ago, and you went the traditional route. You got an agent, you got a top publisher. At any point in that period when you were writing the book or thinking of bringing it to market, did you consider self-publishing?
That's a great question, too. Self-publishing, like knowing about self-publishing, gave me a lot of creative freedom in the beginning. Because when I first started writing a book, I was like, I did kind of fall into that trap of like, well, why would I do this? And who is going to read it? And the likelihood of getting this published is so small. So maybe I shouldn't start. And I was very grateful that thinking didn't last very long. I came across Joanna Penn. She's a big podcaster, and she writes a lot about self-publishing. And I was like, oh, well, there's a whole world for writers to get their work out on their own. And so learning about small presses and learning about self-publishing was really empowering. And then as I went down the path of publishing, I just kind of thought, well, I'm just going to try it. Like, I'll try to get an agent. And if I don't get an agent, then I'll think about what happens after that. So I ended up not needing to go that route this time. But I think knowing about self-publishing and knowing about small presses can really be an awesome thing for kids and for adults who want to participate in conversations.
One of the things that I've heard self-published authors describe as a benefit to that path is the control they have over the title of the book, the way the cover looks, the pricing, all of that. And your book has an unusual title, The Minor Dramas and Other Catastrophes. With that as an example, did you select the title? Did you find any? How did the title come about?
That's a great question too. And I talk about this with my students a lot, and they kind of become indignant about the lack of control that I have during the process. For me, my perspective is more like the fewer things I have to think about, the better. Like the more space I have for story. But for other people who really are great marketers or want to think about this whole package, they can control. So with my title, I'm really not that great at thinking of titles. My first title for this book was Detention, and I found my agent with that title. And then she said she didn't like it. She wanted something that had more words, like sort of like a Big Little Lies or a Little Fires Everywhere title. And one of my really good friends is great at thinking of things like that. So she brainstormed a bunch of titles and came up with Minor Catastrophes, which is close to what we have. And we pitched it as that, and then the publisher decided they wanted the word drama in the title. So they pitched Minor Dramas and Other Catastrophes. And at that point, like, as an author, you could throw a fit about that, but you can't, it's not really your decision, and you can't throw a fit about everything. You know, you have to be a good person to work with. And so for me, I was like, okay, sure. If that's the title that we have, great. And same with our cover, that went through several versions too. And my students are always like, you didn't get to pick the cover? And I'm like, no, I don't. I get to say what I think, but it's not my decision. And in fact, like the sales team is the team that really, but again, like to me, that's a little bit of a relief because I don't have the skills that those salespeople have, and I don't have the market knowledge that they have. So I'm glad to have part of it in their hands.
Did you throw a fit about anything? Was there a hill that you did choose to die on?
Well, I'm from Minnesota, and we don't throw a lot of fits here. So they didn't ask me to do anything that I was really opposed to. During my editing process, my agent wanted me to tighten up before we submitted it to the publisher, she wanted me to tighten up the ending and to make the book a little bit shorter. And she had suggested cutting a few scenes. And I didn't like the scenes I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to cut the scenes that she suggested. I thought that they were too meaningful to the characters and gave too much information about their emotions and motivations. So instead, I cut the book in other places. And so I told her, like, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to do this. What do you think? And she liked what I did that way. So I haven't thrown a fit about anything with the publisher, but there has been back and forth throughout.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned in a blog post you wrote about the idea of a comp title. I wasn't familiar with that, but these are books that are promoted as part of the marketing, saying if you love this book, you'll like this new one. Talk about that and the process of figuring out which comp titles got associated with your book.
Yeah, this is a really interesting thing in publishing where you have to be able to say where your book fits into the marketplace. So where it would be like on a shelf with which other books. And it's a hard thing to do because you want to write something really original. So you don't want to say this book is exactly like that other book out there. But at the same time, you want to be able to fit in a little bit so that like if your book club most recently read Big Little Lies, then someone in the book club would say, oh, well, next we can read Minor Dramas and Other Catastrophes. So it's a dance. And you also have to figure out, you want titles that were successful, but not wildly successful. So like if you're trying to get an agent or a publisher and you say, I'm the next J.K. Rowling, this book is like Harry Potter, they're going to be like, well, this person has a massive ego. Who doesn't know what they're talking about. So you have to do a little bit of research and you have to read pretty widely to find the right authors and titles that are like aspirational goals for you, but actually reachable and that your book is in conversation with in some interesting ways. So I'm constantly on the lookout for writers that remind me of myself, which is kind of funny.
You tell the story in that post about Big Little Lies as being a potential kind of title, but maybe more in the category of Harry Potter, the big reach, but then someone actually mentioned it. I had that same thought come through my mind. I hadn't read that book, but I watched the TV series, and the quality that reminded me was the scene was so kind of ordinary and the drama was so heightened, almost excruciating. And I found myself following the story in your book of, well, we're in a school, we're in a library, we're online doing stuff, and yet I feel this panic about what's about to happen. And is that the connection that you see between the two books?
Yeah, absolutely. And also when I read Big Little Lies, I just admired so much the way Moriarty, I write from multiple characters' perspectives, and she does that too. And she does it so beautifully. It made me feel like, oh, I could make this work. So like that format. And then also those everyday dramas, like the reality of being a mom and juggling your job and your kids and your friends and people's expectations of you and the mistakes that you make in public and private. All of those topics are fascinating for me. But to be compared to Liane Moriarty, like that is, for me, that's like a jump up and down moment because I find her to be so readable. Like her books are, they're accessible. So it's not like you need to be an English major from Harvard to enjoy the book. And yet the writing is so smart and the topics are so relevant that they feel important and big in their own way. So yeah, she's the pinnacle. I would just really love to meet her someday.
Now you're working on your second novel. How is that going to differ from this one?
Well, in the first book, in Minor Dramas, the adults make all the mistakes and the kids are pretty perfect. I love writing teenagers. I've worked with them for a long time. So in Minor Dramas, our kids are the ones who have reason and logic, and they're the ones that are doing the right thing, and the parents are messing up. And in my second book, I kind of flip that. The kids are a little younger. They're in middle school. And they make some really bad choices and public mistakes. And I kind of explore how your kids' mistakes and successes reflect on you as a parent in terms of your reputation in your community. So
that goes to what you said earlier about the helicopter parents having to accept. You're showing parents having to accept some failure and how to do it wisely, maybe.
For sure. And that would be so hard. I mean, I'm going to knock on wood here. Like, thank goodness neither of my children have done anything like criminal yet. But I can't even imagine like picking up the pieces from that. So, and the kids don't get arrested or anything in my new book, but they make some pretty big mistakes. So it was interesting to think about recovery from that.
Yeah, for sure. And you're still doing now. You're writing full time now. So what does your writing day look like now compared to when you had to get up at 4:45 in the morning?
Yes, it's this year I'm not teaching in the classroom, so I have a little more flexibility. I get up a little later. I still like to get up before my kids are awake, but I use that time to kind of take care of some administrative stuff rather than get right into my writing. And then once my kids are at school, I spend the morning working on my writing. I have a few colleagues other writers that I like to work, either in a studio with them or like kind of in their vicinity, and check in. And I usually try to work on writing at least until lunchtime. And then I will take a break and exercise, and then go back to some more administrative type tasks or other family responsibilities that I have. So whereas I used to spend about an hour to an hour and a half writing a day, now I spend 4 to 5 hours writing a day.
Now you're going out on a book tour, and how many cities are you going to?
I'll be in Chicago and Boston, so near your daughter in Cambridge.
Yes, I'm going to be there too. You're going to be in Belmont, Mass, so I'm hoping to stop by and maybe bring my daughter with me.
I love that. Okay, and then I'll be in Dallas and Houston, and then I have events in a couple of Minneapolis suburbs here, Excelsior and Stillwater. Tonight I'll be, your podcast listeners won't hear this by then, but I'll be in northern Minnesota, and then I have an event in Indianapolis in April.
Cool.
So, and I'm going to my mom's book club in Arizona.
All right.
Yeah.
My daughter, the writer.
Yeah.
The one thing I've noticed, I've talked to some authors that are published with Amazon Publishing, which, much more digital marketing. Mm-hmm. I don't think they really do much in book tours, and the traditional publishers tend to do more on the book tours. In talking with the folks at Berkeley, mm-hmm. What do they think is the benefit for them as a publisher, you as the author, for the expense and the time to, go to a store, have 20, 50, maybe how many people there listen to a reading? Are they really selling enough books to make that worthwhile, or has the book tour purpose changed in the past 10 or 15 years? What do you think? What do you hope happens when you're out on the road?
Those are great questions, and some of those fall under the category of things I'm glad I don't have to know the answers to. But I think that the big part for me and what I'm hoping to gain, and I think with Berkeley too, is like the relationships with these independent booksellers are so important. Independent bookstores are really great community resources. The booksellers in stores are hand-selling books. They're often choosing the books that become sort of influential through their promotion activities, and maintaining those relationships is really important. And I think the publisher, what they tell me is that they try not to send me any place that I'm not going to have an audience. So like they try to make it worth their while, and mine too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I have been speaking with Kathleen West, author of Minor Dramas and Other Catastrophes, her debut novel published this week by Berkeley, an imprint of Penguin Random House. Thanks very much, Kathleen.
Oh, thank you so much. This was really a lot of fun.
That's it for this week. I have reached out to Bradley Metrock to see if he can join us next week to talk about Macmillan and the libraries, but I haven't heard back from him as of yet as I'm putting the show to bed tonight. Darlene and I were in Iowa, let's see, when was that? Earlier this week, and we did some political work there, which you can hear about if you check out my EdgeCast podcast. I did a couple of episodes there from Iowa, and I'm hoping to write a Medium post because it was really fascinating. We ended up having a ringside seat at an actual caucus where we helped to help the local party people put on a caucus where 138 people were choosing their Democratic candidates for president, and it was really pretty exciting. And then, of course, the whole counting of the caucus results got very strange, and we had waiting around for the results to be announced, and then finally Mayor Pete came out and he knew what the numbers were even though they hadn't been released, so he rather boldly declared that he was leaving Iowa victorious on his way to New Hampshire. I am going to be traveling back to Boston on Monday so that I can be up in New Hampshire on primary day, and so I'll have some more front row activity there to pass along on EdgeCast. I've also been doing a little bit of talking on about these adventures in the Morning Journal flash briefing for Alexa, and you can listen in on that. If you have an Alexa device, you can just say, Alexa, enable Morning Journal, and then if you say each morning, Alexa, what's new, you'll hear my 4-minute episode, along with any other news that you might be subscribing to as flash briefings, BBC, NPR, things like that. I'm having great fun doing that each morning. That's it. Len Edgerly from Denver, Colorado for the Kindle Chronicles. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to my show. Have a great day. Bye.